The third name in the Chronicles took us to the middle of America, to a farm town in Wisconsin that believed, with all its heart, that the war was something that happened to other people, somewhere else. It is the kind of town that puts its name on the water tower and means it. 900 people, one school, one traffic light that blinks yellow all night. The kind of place where nothing ever happens, which was exactly the problem. We found Walt Brenner on his porch. He coached football at the high school for 30 seasons. When the panic finally came, the people did not call the mayor or the sheriff. They called the coach. He is still a little embarrassed about that. He is 76, built like a man who used to move blocking sleds for fun. He told it the way he'd break down game film, slow, honest, taking blame where it was his. For weeks, it was just headlines. India, Brazil, places far enough away to feel like weather. He watched it in the diner, over eggs, with everybody else. People said a prayer for those poor folks overseas, and passed the potatoes. Denial, he said, is the most comfortable room in the house. The schools stayed open. The team practiced. He ran 2-a-days in August, like he had for 30 years, and the boys grumbled about the heat, and nobody grumbled about the news, because the news was still happening to strangers, far away. Then a young man came home, a local boy who'd gone to work in Chicago, back on a bus with a bandage on his arm and a story about the crowds at the station. His mother took him in and put him to bed, the way you do. That was the Tuesday. By Friday, she called the coach at midnight, because in a town like that, you call the man you trust. He drove out. He'd buried players before, car wrecks, a drowning. He knew grief. He learned that night the difference between grief and what was coming up the road behind it. He will not tell us what was in that farmhouse, only that he and the deputy did what had to be done, and that the deputy was sick in the yard afterward, and that Walt drove straight to the school, because he understood, the way you understand a 2-minute drill, that the clock had started. He opened the school, brick walls a foot thick, one road in, a football field with nothing to hide behind for 100 yards in every direction. He had spent 30 years learning every inch of that campus, and never once thought of it as a fort. That night he thought of nothing else. He rang the fire bell at dawn and told the town the truth, plainly, the way he'd told a locker room they were down by 20 at the half. Some called him crazy, but he had the farmhouse and the deputy's face, and the town will follow the one man who is already moving. By that night, half the town was in the gym. Babies in equipment baskets, the concession stand turned into a kitchen. He put a banner over the scoreboard. It said, "Home." "You have to name a place," he said, "before people will defend it." The team boarded the windows with the bleachers. They'd moved those bleachers for every home game for years. The FFA kids fenced the parking lot with hog panels. Everybody had a job. Fear is the first enemy, he said, and work is the only cure anybody's ever found for it. A ham radio kid, Danny Kessler, he wanted the name used, pulled a signal out of the air one night, relayed from half a world away. 3 lines a town in India had painted on a water tank. Danny brought them to the coach at 2 a.m, like he'd caught a pass in the end zone. The coach read them once. Then he sent Danny up the biggest silo in the county with a bucket of barn paint and told him to put the words where every farm for 10 miles could read them. A thing you can read from your own porch, he said, feels true in a way a television never will. If you can fight, fight. If you cannot fight, climb. If you cannot climb, float. On the dry plains, only the first 2 lines applied. But he left all 3, because the third was for somebody else, somewhere, with water. The words weren't just for us, he said. They were passing through. They came across the football field at dawn. He'd watched 1,000 kickoffs from that sideline, and his body knew the sight of a crowd moving onto that field before his mind would admit what kind of crowd it was. A team that never called a timeout, never got tired, and did not care at all how the game was going. He ran it like a game. That is the whole of what he'll take credit for. Rotate your line, rest your hands. Nobody freelances, and when the other side has more players than you do not try to beat them. You try to run out the clock. The clock in Wisconsin is winter. He'd been telling boys for 30 years that you win the season in the 4th quarter, in the cold, when the other team's legs are gone. He looked at that grey crowd on his field in October and thought, I know how to beat a bigger team. I let the weather do the hitting. A siege is boring, and boredom in a crowded gym is dangerous, so he made a schedule. School for the kids in the locker rooms, watch rotations, church in the wrestling room. He kept 900 frightened people busy and fed and on a timetable, and that was harder than any goal line stand he ever coached. The one rule he would not bend: you show your arm to come inside, every time. He checked the school board president the same as the hired man, made more enemies with that flashlight than with any call he ever made from the sideline. But a bite you don't catch is a bite that gets everybody. The worst of it was that you knew them. Every face at that fence was somebody's cousin, somebody's teacher, a boy he'd coached. So he made a rule. You don't stand a man on the wall who has to look at his own family down there. You rotate him off. A good coach knows which players to bench. And then the weather came, right on schedule. The first hard freeze hit in the second week of November, 40 below with the wind, and the thing they'd feared all autumn simply stopped, mid-stride at the fence, frosted over like the fence posts. The clock had finally started ticking on the other team. By December, the field was full of statues, hundreds of them, standing exactly where they'd been trying to reach the school. The town looked out at them every morning over coffee. You never got used to it, he said, but you learned to look at it the way you look at snow, a thing the winter does, a thing that must be cleared before spring. The clearing is the part he won't describe. He said only that what froze in December, they cleared in January, before the thaw, because a thing that freezes will move again when it warms. The whole town worked it, in shifts, and nobody spoke of it at supper, and they burned what had to be burned. He stood the last watch at that fire himself every night of the clearing. A coach doesn't send his boys to do the thing he won't do, and somebody ought to be awake, he said, to remember that these had been people. The fire needed a mourner, so he mourned. They lost 2 people to the fever, and he wrote their names on the gym wall under the banner that said home. He walked the cots every night, 900 people, counted the way he used to count helmets coming off the bus. You bring home the number you left with, that's the whole job. There were good hours too, kids sledding on the snowbank. A wedding in the wrestling room in January, because life does not wait for a war to be over. A baby born in the nurse's office. They named her Hope, he said, and then apologized for how obvious it was. There is nothing wrong with obvious, when it's true. The dangerous time came at the thaw. What they hadn't cleared would soften and move again, and there is always something you missed, out past the fence line, under the snow. He put the town back on the walls, tired as they were, and said, the fourth quarter is where you win it, and nobody argued. The National Guard reached them in April. The county map had this town marked as lost. The soldiers came up the road expecting a graveyard, and found 900 people, a garden going in on the 50-yard line, and a coach who made the relief column show their arms at the gate. Discipline, he said, doesn't switch off for a uniform. The lieutenant asked who was in charge. Nobody really, he said. The town was in charge. I just kept the schedule. The lieutenant wrote in his notebook. Town intact, morale high, defended by the football coach. He keeps a copy of that page next to his first championship photo. He is prouder of the page. They put the town back together the way they'd defended it, in shifts with a schedule. The diner opened first, because a town needs a place to sit down together and complain about ordinary things. The day somebody complained about the coffee, he knew they'd won. They held a 4th of July that first summer that half the town cried through. Not from sadness exactly, from the strangeness of being allowed to gather in the open, in the dark, with music, and not be afraid of the noise. They'd kept the boards on the gym windows 1 extra year, the way you keep a lucky jersey. He walks the field most evenings, same fence. He had them leave it up, dents and all, when they built the new stands. The boosters wanted something nicer. He said no. A town ought to keep the fence that held. Let the kids ask about the dents. Make them ask. The graduating class carries the names now, from the year they called the long winter. They read them at every home game, out loud, before the anthem, and then they play football, because the reading and the playing belong together. You honor the dead, he said, and then you go live loudly, right in front of them. That's the deal. He teaches a unit at the school now, not football, the long winter. He makes the kids design a defense of their own town. Where's your fort? Where's your one road? What's your clock? Ours was the winter, he tells them. Find yours before you need it. That's the only homework that ever mattered. Danny Kessler runs the co-op now. The 3 lines are still on his garage wall, framed, in his own teenage handwriting. Danny heard the whole world that year. India, Brazil, a woman in the London underground. Danny knew it was one war before any of us did, because Danny was listening to all of it at once. They play football on that field every fall now, the whole town in the stands, and behind the goalposts, on the horizon, the faded words on the silo. Nobody in the stands is looking at the silo, and the coach says that is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen, a whole town safe enough to not look. He cries at the games sometimes, and nobody minds. Tell them the marching band is the point, he said. We spent 2 years being quiet in the dark so our grandchildren could be as loud as they want. When you hear a marching band, that's what you're hearing. A whole town being loud, on purpose, right where it used to be afraid. We left on the morning bus, past the field, past the water tower, and the coach waved us off the way he waved off 1,000 team buses. We will not tell you what the silo says now, weather grey over a green town. Go ask a grandparent. That is the whole design. Make them ask. This has been the Wanderers Chronicles. If you can fight, fight.